Good morning, everyone. The last few talks I've given have been on, started with koans from the Vines and Entanglements collection, and I'm going to continue that theme of koans from that collection. If you haven't seen that book yet, it's by Thomas Juho Kirchner, and his translations are really wonderful. And what has interested me is after many years of working with koans, there's a number of koans in this book that I've never seen before. A lot of them are ones that are familiar, a little different translations of some of the ones that are in other collections. But there are quite a few of them that are unique, and some of them are really wonderful. So I'm going to start out by sharing one of them today. This is case 56 in Vines and Entanglements. It's called Gushan's Gatha. Now, a Gatha, for those of you who don't know, is a poem. Normally, Gathas are written after someone has some kind of enlightenment experience. So they'll have an experience, and then the poem is it's kind of traditional, or was traditional, to write a poem about your understanding of the Dharma or about your experience. And they're usually quite short and a little bit formatted, maybe. But I'll read the koan first and then get to the Gatha, which is only 2 lines long later. Gushan Shigui said, "For 10 years at sea, I have sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." I'll read that one more time. Gushan Shigui said, "For 10 years at sea, I have sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." One of the things that I really love about this book, his translations, is he has wonderful little footnotes that explain some of the Chinese characters that he translated for this collection. And the art of translating ancient languages of any sort into modern English is pretty amazing. Ancient Chinese, and especially the Chinese language that was associated with Zen, is, I'm sure, especially complex. Because as usual, in any language, words can mean different things. It's true in English. It's especially true in Japanese, where you see a Japanese word and it can mean literally like 20 different things depending on the context it's used in, which is what makes the language difficult. Chinese is no exception. So anyway, what I thought was fascinating about this koan is that the word enemy, he translates it as enemy because he felt that that was the sense of the word that that best fit this line, but it can also mean a lover. And it can also mean one's original face, which is another way of saying in Buddhism or in Zen, your Buddha mind. So it can mean an enemy, it can mean lover, it can mean Buddha mind, the same 2 characters. Kind of interesting, huh? So the beautiful thing about this line, "For 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest," is that all 3 of those things could apply to the line. You could use them interchangeably in a certain sense. It does change the meaning of it, I believe, but maybe not that much, and maybe not at all. In any event, let's look at it as enemy. "For 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy. Until I find my enemy, I cannot rest." What this reminded me of when I read it for the first time is the poem. I should have looked up which koan it was out of the Blue Cliff record. I can't remember which one it is. But there's a line in a poem that's written after a koan after the commentary to a koan in the Blue Cliff record that talks about, or says, "How many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon Cave? How many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon's Cave?" And for many years, I I kind of interpreted that based on the fact that it was just a regular dragon. You know, it just happened to be a blue dragon, which didn't mean much to me. And then one day I figured, you know what? I think I was talking to Sensei Robert about something, and I thought, I'm going to just look it up. What is the blue dragon? What's the significance? And it turns out that there's 4 different colored dragons in Chinese uh, mythology. And the blue dragon symbolizes rebirth and spring. Um, so this person is descending. He's talking about descending into the blue dragon's cave, which we would normally think is a quite harrowing thing, you know, and in many movies and TV series that you see where dragons are involved, uh, these mythical Chinese characters, there's a lot of danger involved in going down to meet a dragon. Sometimes the dragon kills you, and sometimes, at least in these TV movies and shows, the dragon can be tamed, and then you harness the energy of the dragon, right? Which is extremely powerful. If you can harness the energy of the dragon, it's really something. So in this case of the Blue Dragon's Cave, though, I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of renewal, so how many times have I gone down? Have I gone into that place within myself where I can be renewed, where I can experience true creativity, true renewal, right? The Blue Dragon's Cave. And the interesting thing about that one is it says, how many times have I gone for you into the Blue Dragon's Cave? Who is the you? You know, I think it's really important to see who the you is in that koan. So this one, for 10 years at sea, I've sought my enemy until I find my enemy, I cannot rest. We have to look at, well, this is a koan, so it's not about a guy who really went to sea in a boat and he's looking for to fight someone, you know. But we all do that. We've all gone through at least some point in our lives when we've been in contention with something someone or something that we regard as being an enemy, right? And maybe it's been many years of feeling that the world and others are enemies of ours. But there's no rest in that. There's no peace in constantly battling with enemies. As long as we perceive the enemy as being something separate from us, uh, then we're always seeking to kill or capture or control. Let's say we want to control the enemy, right? Well, let's look at it in the inner sense, because Zen is always about the inner sense of things. You know, from the Western psychological standpoint, we could say that Zen is always about our inner psychology. So whenever a koan is talking about the enemy, what is it really talking about? And what does it mean to be for a decade, or you could say for a lifetime, I've been at sea. So the metaphor of the sea, right? It's this vast open place where there's no restrictions in the movement we can make. You can make any kind of a turn when you're in the ocean, you know. But if you're in this vast open space and you still are seeing your life as the search for the enemy and the vanquishing of the enemy, the vanquishing of the things within the self that are not congruent with how we feel deep down in that blue dragon's cave that we need to experience in order to have this kind of renewal, this constant feeling of renewal, we can't rest. There's an implication in this koan of the search, right? There's the searching at sea. Well, the chances of running into something at sea are minimal. It's a huge, vast area. And to find the enemy in the sea is not easy. That's, in this case, this person's been doing this a long time, perhaps, you know, really been searching for that, for whatever that person needed to resolve. What did they need to resolve? What did they need to vanquish? What did they need to overcome? You know? And eventually in Zen practice, we come to this point, hopefully we come to this point where we see that the enemy is right here. The enemy is not Kelly or Anne, Caitlin, you know. might appear like that at times. The ego is very clever at kind of tricking us. Uh, in other words, when there's some part of us that doesn't want to be revealed because it's highly protected, maybe from a very early time in our life, uh, then we're constantly triggered whenever that part is challenged. Uh, and it's kind of like the blue dragon's cave in that it's deeply, deeply hidden within the self. It's not really deeply hidden. When I use terms like deeply, there's an implication that it's not right there, but actually it's always right there. It's really interesting how we hide things from our own self. Uh, they get twisted. They're not even so much hidden, they're twisted. And that twisting, it's like untangling a knot, untangling a ball of cord that's all tangled together. It's all right there. All the different things, all the different elements we need are right there, but they're not able to function when they're all tied up, when they're all tied up with each other. They have to be separated out, given space to exist in the way that they naturally do when the ego is not in charge of that process. So the enemy is seen through when we realize that we are responsible for creating the enemy. We create the enemy on some level of our mind, usually because we need some form of protection very early on in our life, often at least. And then we wall off that part. And then it becomes, over the years, tangled up, becomes tangled up in all kinds of other things. And then there's confusion. How do I get through this? How do I change? How do I go deeper? And we start to go deeper, and all we encounter is this tangled mess. One thing tangled up with the other, you know. So we could say, in a way, that our practice is a process of getting in touch with the tangled parts and untangling them. But once you untangle them, then they can be used for something. You know, cord that's all tangled up, I mean, you can't really use it for much. When you untangle it all, then you can tie things up with the cord or whatever you want to do. So the untangling process is not easy, as you might imagine, or you probably don't have to imagine it if you've been doing this practice for a while. You've probably already encountered this many times. How many times? I don't know. How many times do you have to go into the Blue Dragon's Cave for renewal? I don't know. You know. And then, of course, we have some experience of freedom, and then what do we want? Well, we want to be free all the time. But we realize that, guess what? We feel free today. And then 3 days later, something happens. You know, we have to go back to work, or a child of ours is really bad, or, you know, we check our financial situation. We realize I can't afford this, or we have some health crisis or whatever. And all of a sudden, the triggers all are activated again, and we don't feel so free anymore. We have to go down into that cave again for renewal, and integrating all those things that are just the realities of our life, the reality of getting older, the reality of the human body, the reality of relationships, tangled up, right? So the actual Gatha here, maybe this is actually part of the Gatha, the first part, but the rest of it is blossoming peony flowers like bodhisattvas' faces, scattered palm fronds like demons' heads. Blossoming peony flowers like bodhisattvas' faces. You know, sometimes flowers inside of flowers look like faces, right? Scattered palm fronds like demons' heads. I don't quite get that metaphor, but I'll take it for what it is. So I love these two lines because it really, there's the rest, right? But then there's also the bodhisattva's faces and the demon's heads. And you can't dispense with either one. You know, the minute that we want to chase after and seek the bodhisattva's faces to the exclusion of the demon's heads, then we miss those parts of ourself that need to be worked with. Down in the Blue Dragon Cave again, right? Keep going. How many times? I don't know. Maybe, maybe dozens or hundreds or thousands or millions, but do we have a choice? You know, as practitioners, the object is to become more clear as we keep practicing, and and to work with whatever comes up. So working with whatever comes up means whatever comes up. And if we have preference for the bodhisattva faces, and that's all we want to work with, that's all we want to deal with, then we're missing a large part of the equation that needs to be integrated. It doesn't mean that it doesn't perhaps get easier in a lot of ways as we keep doing it, as we do it for many years. But it also doesn't mean that we won't encounter deeply set demons heads that we haven't seen before, just because there's been so much entanglement, quantum entanglement. It's all mixed up in some way that we can't figure out. Time and space and matter and everything that seems real maybe doesn't even apply when we're working with this kind of stuff, right? We have to apply magic to it, magical processes. What's magical processes? Well, they're things we don't understand exactly how they work the way we do, the way they do, but we see that they work. So the magical process of meditation, for instance, is a lot of people would say, well, you know, Zen is not about magic. Well, isn't it? I mean, is it really not about magic? Now, how can you explain how things resolve themselves when we become aware? How can we explain why we're here on this planet in the first place doing this? How can we explain any of that? Kind of magical, right? So I remember my Zumi Roshi, when he would talk about the notion of the bodhisattva, he would talk about it as constantly being willing to doubt when you need to. When doubt arises, rather than dismissing it as, well, I'm too enlightened for doubt, or no, doubt is negative and blowing past it. He talked about the need to go fully into the doubt. You know, that's the life of the bodhisattva. When doubt arises, you work with doubt. When bodhisattvas arise or bodhisattva type activity arises, you can merge with that. You know, going into the Blue Dragon's Cave again and again and again.